What's going on, everyone? It's Paul here with the Last Call Fantasy Football podcast on March 13th, a Friday the 13th. Um, Here riding solo and going to be breaking down all of the major movers when it comes to this past free agency first and second waves, the fallout from a fantasy perspective when it comes to each of these different moves and what implications there might be. Is it a good move? Is it a bad move? We're going to be breaking all that down here on this fine Friday afternoon. And let's get right into it. It's last call. Cheers. Okay, so what I'm going to try to do is go as chronologically in order as I can. I might bounce around a little bit just based on the moves and what teams they affect. But the very first domino to fall, many people thought he was probably the prized possession to have in this free agency period, was Alec Pierce, who ends up going back to the Indianapolis Colts for I think it's a 3 or 4 year, almost $100 million extension. Um, this move kind of coincides with Michael Pittman getting traded to the Steelers to free up some cap space there, uh, which they eventually used to extend Daniel Jones with. So I think this is a clear indication of the direction that the Colts want to go with. Alec Pierce, it's funny. I think a lot of people assume he's this deep threat, which he certainly is. And especially the first couple of years of his career, he was certainly viewed as such. What I saw last year was a lot more inbreakers. So I think he's evolving as a receiver. I think Indianapolis sees that as a result of this deal, and they're going to be relying on him to be that outside presence. And he may have to absorb some of these Michael Pittman targets. But I think when you look at the room, it really has shaken down to Alec Pierce, Josh Downs, Tyler Warren. I think Michael Pittman moving on to Pittsburgh opens up opportunities for all of these guys. So I think the wealth will get distributed. Daniel Jones seems to be under the impression that he will be starting week 1, which I think would be pretty aggressive with the late Achilles tear that he suffered last year. But they seem optimistic. He seems optimistic. So if you do have even a diminished Daniel Jones playing middle of the pack quarterback play, I think you can be pretty confident with Alec Pierce, a Josh Downs, a Tyler Warren in their appropriate draft slots. Now, what are those appropriate draft slots? I think you could probably look at Alec Pierce as being bumped up into maybe as aggressively as a third round. That might seem ridiculous. It might seem like expensive from a fantasy football perspective, but he's 25 years old, just got paid like a top 12 receiver, and he's going to have his quarterback back who helped feed his production this past season. I know he's only ever had about 40 odd receptions. I think 44 or 47 was his career high this past year. I think you take all that, and with Michael Pittman and his 120 targets disappearing, I do believe that there is upside to Alec Pierce now that probably wasn't there when it was a more crowded receiver room. Um, and yeah, I think you know what. Let's do Michael Pittman as well while we're talking about this, because I think this is definitely what the Steelers needed. They only had 2 receivers, I think, on the roster in DK Metcalf and I think it was Ben Skowronek. I think this is exactly what they needed. A reception monster who just is steady and reliable, moves the chains. Someone who's going to be in the right place at the right time for whichever quarterback they decide to bring back, which does seem to be the case that Aaron Rodgers will be returning to the Steelers. Of course, that's unconfirmed as of today. However, I do think that he's going to do his Aaron Rodgers thing where he decides to skip out on OTAs and some of training camp, and he'll eventually sign. But hopefully not too late this time around, because you do want him to get affiliated with the system that he might have some familiarity with through Mike McCarthy. You want him to get on the same page as Michael Pittman, because when it comes to these possession receivers, you do need to have that timing and that synergy to be able to execute what he's very good at. Not to mention, it's not like him and DK Metcalf got off on a strong foot last year. So I expect them to be adding another receiver through the draft or free agency shortly. You can't be going into the season with Michael Pittman and DK Metcalf effectively your only two receivers. I think I wouldn't be surprised if Michael Pittman Jr. ends up being a better fantasy asset than DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf last season really only had a handful of really helpful weeks for you where he was able to catch a slant and take off. That was kind of his bread and butter last year, and there wasn't a lot else to that Steelers offense. So maybe the new system will help. But I think you can always rely on someone like a Michael Pittman Jr., who's going to be in the right spot, move the chains. So in PPR especially, I would be picking Michael Pittman over DK Metcalf in those middle rounds. Maybe, let's say fourth or fifth round as the top receiving option potentially in the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. I think this was almost directly after the Alec Pierce news came out, was that Malik Willis, the highly sought after quarterback, backup quarterback from the Green Bay Packers, ends up signing with Miami, and the breadcrumbs were all there. I think you get Halfley, who was I think he was offensive coordinator. He was a coach up in Green Bay, who's now moved down to Miami as the head coach there. Obviously, has a lot of familiarity with Malik Willis and his game. And honestly, when the news broke, I thought there was a possibility that Malik Willis would leak up into that $40-ish million a year range, and the Dolphins were able to get it done pretty cheaply. I think it comes in around $27 million a year to be their starting quarterback. So I think the offense is obviously going to be very different from the Mike McDaniel offense. That goes without saying. I think you're going to see a lot more run game, especially as they continue to build up their offensive line. And you look at the weapons that they have on the Miami offense these days. It's really Jalen Waddle on the outside, and then you have your Devon Achane, Ollie Gordon, Jalen Wright. Like they have a handful of running backs, I think, that they're going to try to lean into, especially in a rebuilding year. But I do think, I think Jalen Waddle's stock will go up. A more consistent deep ball from Malik Willis. I expect them to do, like I said, run the ball, set up your play action, and you can start taking some of these deep shots with Waddle, who, as far as I'm concerned, still has the speed and still has the ability to get open as a top 10 pick that he was taken at back in the day. But I mean, I think he gets a boost, certainly. No Tyreek Hill there to take any targets either. Miami was, of course, a bit of certainly a mess towards the end of the season last year. They were playing Quinn and Ewers. A lot of dump offs at Devon Achane, which I do think that has to be a concern if you're a Devon Achane owner or if you're interested in that player. I don't think the dump offs are going to be as consistent as they were last year. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think he was up around 70 or 80 receptions as a running back, which that is just a huge boon, especially in half PPR and PPR formats, where I think Malik Willis is more prone to take off and run himself rather than do the dump off game. And who knows, maybe he evolves as a quarterback, and that can be a part of his offense as he develops and plays this new offense, I guess old offense, in a new location. And I think I think it is a good fit. The offensive line, they've made investments. It started around in a form. They had better success rate running the ball last year compared to prior years, certainly. And I think the removal of a Tua Tagovailoa, you can expect deeper air yard targets, I think, for all the receivers, like the Malik Washingtons and what's the other guy's name? It's another Malik something. I don't think they're going to really play all that much into this offense, and they could be a great location for one of these tight ends to come in during this coming draft. Imagine Eli Stowers would be a great fit and exactly what they need in an offense like this. So I'd be on the lookout for something like that. But yes, upgrade at quarterback, at least on paper. They're going to have to eat a lot of money over the next 2 years on this Tua deal, but it's unfortunately the state of the union down in Miami is they had to get rid of Tua. They weren't going to move in with a new GM coach and regime with Tua lingering around, and Tua does end up signing with the Falcons as a stopgap until Michael Penix gets better. Um, I don't have a lot to say about that these days. I think Tua is going to be fine in that offense. It'll be the best offensive line he's probably played behind in a long time, and we'll see. Like, see if he can recover his career and maybe get money and get paid the next season if he can show up and prove on a very cheap deal in Atlanta. Okay, another big domino that fell day one was, of course, Kenneth Walker going to the Kansas City Chiefs. It's about 15 million bucks a year, which is pretty good money. It's not that top tier of Saquon Barkley or Christian McCaffrey, but it's very close. And he's going to go in there and try to upgrade that run game. Like if you've watched the Chiefs, which I'm sure many of you have over the past seasons because they're always on prime time, they have consistently had a hard time breaking explosives. And I think the Kareem Hunts and the Isaiah Pacheco's, who he hasn't really looked himself since he came back from that broken leg 2 seasons ago, but they've never had someone like Kenneth Walker in a number of years now, where the Chiefs are very good at success rate when it comes to running the ball. They can get 4 or 5 yards consistently. I think you insert a Kenneth Walker into this backfield with that good interior offensive line that they have, and I think you can start expecting some doubles and triples and home runs to start emerging from this run game, which is something that they've lacked. And it's really been I think you're not going to take away from Patrick Mahomes. I think it's still going to be a pass first offense, but if anything, that should lighten the box for Ken Walker to spring some of these runs as well. Like, I think it does set up well. I think he's a perfect fit. And as I've alluded in the past, I think these teams that are taking running backs and paying running backs right now within the top 10 seem to have a feeling that Jeremiah Love is not going to be falling to them, where they were maybe hoping to address this for their team through the draft in a Jeremiah Love. So Ken Walker to the Chiefs, very excited. I don't know where he could get steamed up pretty quickly if reports start coming out that Patrick Mahomes is on schedule. He'll be starting week one, which he says he wants to do. The reports, especially once we get into hype season, are going to be through the roof in terms of Kenneth Walker's ability and the situation he's in and the everything I've already outlined. I think he could end up in that second round. Of redraft or dynasty startups at this point. He's still fairly young. I think he's 20. He might be 27 already, but that is okay. I'm going to look that up while I continue to talk. And I think that it's certainly a loss to the Seattle Seahawks, who are going to have to figure out some way to address that running back room in a situation where they've lost Kenneth Walker and Charbonnet will not be available right away. His ACL tear came very late in the season, and unfortunately, he's only 25. So Kenneth Walker's 25. So really, you think of the Seattle Seahawks as like a potential. They might be the team who drafts at 32. I don't think they'll spend on a running back there. But I wouldn't be surprised if, like, second round, they start looking at some of these running backs, the Mike Washingtons, the Jadarian Prices, like someone who can take some early down touches, because Charbonnet was situational at best, had some pass catching, but really the room is depleted, and they did lean heavily on the run game for their offense to succeed last season. Obviously, a new offensive coordinator with Kubiak going to the Vegas Raiders. So we'll see if that offense evolves or changes under this new regime on the offensive side of the ball. But it is a loss, in my opinion, to the Seahawks, who I think they knew they weren't going to be able to pay Kenneth Walker with all the re-ups they had to do. They're probably going to have to sprinkle some money on Sam Darnold for the Super Bowl win. They're going to have to re-sign a lot of these defensive players that made them so good. So an unfortunate salary cut loss for the Seahawks, but Ken Walker ends up in a great situation in Kansas City, and he's already getting steamed up, according to these news articles, as a potential top 10 dynasty back. And I'm not there yet. I don't think the volume is going to be as consistent as other guys in the top 10, but I can certainly understand the case. Okay, somewhat of a lesser one here. Isaiah Likely signs with the New York Giants to reunite with Harbaugh from the Ravens. And my initial instinct was this is great. It's good for Jackson Dart to get another weapon. It's good for the Giants, who really only had Malik Neighbors last year. You know, they had the Darius Slaytons and the Wan'Dale Robinsons last year. They lose Wan'Dale Robinson, which we'll get to. And they really needed someone to play out of that slot. And there's nobody quite as opposite to Wan'Dale Robinson as Isaiah Likely, who's a huge, really plays like a power slot, versus Wan'Dale Robinson, who was more of your twitchy slot player, as small as he was. So I like this as a scheme fit for the Giants and for Jackson Dart. I think it takes eyes off of Malik Neighbors and whoever else they decide to bring into the receiver room. I like the idea of a Carnell Tate to the Giants, as much as they don't seem to like that from the Giants standpoint, but it'd be hard to this is a quality move. I guess I'll leave it at that. I don't think I guess the question that we're all going to have with a move like this is, are his targets going to go up and are his snaps going to go up? Because I don't think he ever was better than a 50 or 60% of snaps sort of player for the Ravens during his entire career. He may have never gotten over 50%. I don't have that in front of me, unfortunately, but he's very pass specific. I don't know if he's a liability in the run game, but he certainly didn't play on rushing snaps for the Ravens last season. So good fit for the Giants. I think Theo Johnson might very well be safe in all this. He's humongous, and as a result, will probably never leave the field as your inline tight end, who's also an athletic freak. So I like what they're putting around Jackson Dart in New York, and yes, I think it was curious. Like, that's something I want to next time I have a co-host. I do want to ask their opinion on that, because Mark Andrews, who's certainly longer in the tooth, ends up getting an extension with the Ravens, almost with the assumption that the Ravens knew they weren't going to keep Isaiah Likely, which I think a lot of us were looking at as the interesting and wrong move. But I guess, I mean, I've seen the memes out there too, where it's like big brain thinking John Harbaugh signs Mark Andrews so that the Ravens can't keep Isaiah Likely. And if he got fired, which he did, he would be able to take Isaiah Likely with him to wherever he went. So maybe a little bit of 3D chess there, but I don't think that's the case. I think some familiarity, and Isaiah Likely wasn't the only Baltimore Raven that ended up going to the Giants. So I think some culture guys coming over with Harbaugh is the goal there. Okay. You know what? Let's take a little break. It's it's a lot of talking, and we got a long list still to go. I'll be right back. All right, we're back. And the next player we're going to talk about is Tyler Algier signing a 2-year deal with the Arizona Cardinals. I think this was always potentially a good spot for him to land, simply because he's like a James Conner clone, I think. And while they did re-up James Conner, I think you pay a Tyler Algier to be your now starter. I think James Conner will sprinkle in. And I think, yeah, anyone that's still holding on to Trey Benson, I'm not sure if that's going to ever happen at this point. But I've always liked Tyler Algier's game. Hard runner, destroys safeties that are coming down to make the tackle. Was obviously very productive in his rookie season before Bijan Robinson got there. Had 1,000 yards, a bunch of touchdowns, and I think the Cardinals, if they're anything like the Packers, I think it's a LaFleur down there in Arizona. who is taking over as a head coach, probably wants to establish an identity, and you weren't going to be able to do that with a broken James Conner and a Trey Benson who can't find the gap, and the offensive line being what it is, like they really only have one or two viable pieces there. They need a boost to that room, and I think that's what they're going to do. They want to get back to a more balanced offense. They can't have Jacoby Brissett, who sounds like will be the starter week one, throwing the ball 55 times a game. It's not going to be a winning formula. So I do like the fit with Tyler Algier there. And I mean, Bijan stock was already at an all-time high, so I don't have to say anything about that. Certainly less competition in Atlanta as well. Next piece here, Travis Etienne. So obviously a plethora of running backs falling into place amongst these top 10 drafting teams, which, as I've said, New Orleans is drafting 8. So if they're paying Travis Etienne, which I think is comparable to Ken Walker's money, around that $15 million mark, that they don't seem to think that a Jeremiah Love is going to fall to them. And the same thing with Tyler Algier. I think Arizona looked at that and said, would they like to take Jeremiah Love at number 3 overall? They probably would, but now I would say they're certainly not. And that's, I think, a savvy move by them to pay Tyler Algier. I think it's $6 million. It might be $6 million over 2 years. I think that might be the case to be a starting running back for them when the team is not ready to really make use of a Jeremiah Love. And they have so many other needs on that team. It would be irresponsible team building, really, if you took a Jeremiah Love 3 overall. So, savvy move by Tyler Algier. I mean, the Arizona Cardinals, sorry. And Travis Etienne, I think, steps into a situation here where I think all signs are pointing to Alvin Kamara setting sail into retirement, which honestly, I think this is a good fit for the New Orleans Saints. The one curious thing I would say about it is that for a team that seems like they're constantly in cap, purgatory or hell, they always seem to find enough money to pay a bunch of guys in free agency, which is suspicious to me. I don't know how they do it. I'm sure it's all legal. I'm not saying I'm not saying they're breaking any rules, but they seem to do this to themselves a lot of the time where they're bringing in these expensive free agents, and yet they they have to keep pushing money into the future with some of these veterans who I'm sure they want off the roster. Um, Anyhow, fantasy focused here. Travis Etienne to New Orleans. I think it's a good situation. Tyler Shuck certainly played his guts out towards the back end of the season last year, and adding a weapon that's probably going to have a bit more juice than Alvin Kamara did last season is a good thing. Where Alvin Kamara really didn't seem like himself last season, and there were trade rumors that people were saying around the trade deadline, and he was saying, "Don't you dare trade me, I'll retire." So it certainly seems like the end of a career for Alvin Kamara, which I mean, I had him on my dynasty team for many years, and he was just so much fun to own as a fantasy manager, and he was so much fun to watch. The balance and explosiveness and pass catching, it was all just so great for New Orleans for those seasons, and I wish that they had found a way to win a Super Bowl with him on the roster, but it never came to be. Travis Etienne, where does he slot? I mean, he probably lands in that running back dead zone. I hate to say, because I think New Orleans still is a work in progress. I think the offensive line is good. They have a lot of investment in it, and I think that is good. Shuck, I think Shuck is still a question mark. There could be a sophomore slump coming where the offense just doesn't move down the field as efficiently as it should or could, and I think that might limit Etienne's upside. I'm going to lean on the side of optimism here, and say that Travis Etienne is going to have a great season. I would probably place him in that RB 15 to 16 range if I had to guess. Next player up, Wan'Dale Robinson rejoins Brian Daboll, Tennessee. And I think I think he signs for about $20 million a season, which I think is quite a lot for the player that he is. And I know last season was probably a career best in terms of yards and efficiency and all those things. They certainly moved away from using him only as like a screen guy and his average depth of target being negative. Like he was getting downfield a lot more often last season. He probably started to feel more like himself after that ACL tear 2 years ago. I think that I don't think it's what Tennessee wants or needs though. And you look at the wide receiver room, they have Calvin Ridley, who's probably going to get cut. They have Chimere DK, who I thought was really starting to emerge as a potential starter and consistent starter for them. Very good in the return game and was very good downfield. Alec Iomanner, he is a big-bodied ex-receiver. He could just be out there eating up snaps while the I guess Cam Ward led offense kind of works underneath and tries to take more selective shots. I think the RPO offense of Brian Dable will work well, and this could lead to a lot of just gimme targets for Wan'Dale Robinson if they go back to that kind of schematic usage. Um, but I've never been a Wan'Dale Robinson fan, and I know he can be a PPR scam sometimes. I forget what it was. I think it was 2 seasons ago. He had over 100 catches, but less than 700 yards. So I'm worried that that could be a case again under Brian Daboll. A big piece of news came in. I think it was the second day of a free agency here, but Mike Evans goes to San Francisco, which I think this is a good fit. Um, I think it's great news for all the pass catchers in Tampa Bay. You get your Jalen McMillans, you get your Emeka Ibukas, Chris Godwin's still hanging around. So if he was to retire or leave for some reason, that would be a great domino to fall for me personally, with as an Ibuka owner. But yes, this is the first domino I liked to see for my own sake, and I'm sure a lot of Ibuka's owners out there. But Mike Evans going to San Francisco to be their X receiver, field stretcher, ball winner. I think they've missed that since Ayuk kind of disappeared over the last 2 seasons between injury and personal choices. So I think it's a good pickup for the 49ers. The one thing I'll say is like the 49ers are certainly getting old. Like I think George Kittle, he's going to be in his early 30s. Mike Evans is 32 or 33 now. Christian McCaffrey's turning 30. They've got some old pieces that are all very good players, but they've all been banged up. They are all hitting that threshold where I think you start to get worried. So I'll be curious to see what they do in the draft. I've seen a lot of KC Concepcion to the 49ers in that middle to end of the first round. I would love a fit like that just to add some extra juice to the offense, but great pickup by the 49ers. I think in terms of dynasty startup, Mike Evans will probably end up being like an afterthought to me. I like the one comp that Hayden provided where he might end up producing like a Arizona Cardinals AJ Green. So you can expect maybe the 50 to 60 catches for 800 to 900 yards, plus some red zone touchdowns. So that's certainly viable as a wide receiver 3 or a flex play, and that's where I'd be drafting him when it comes to redraft or startups. Next piece of news here, Rashid Shaheed stays in Seattle, which I think is a vote of confidence that they know that there's more to his game than what they were able to get out of him when they made the trade. He was absolutely dynamic in the return game, but I think there is more juice to squeeze out of a Rashid Shaheed in Seattle, especially if the run game isn't going to be as big a part of the offense like it was last year. So I think Rashid Shaheed, I don't have a good place to put him right now. For the unfortunate thing is he will be largely a projection, which you usually take those players in the back half of your drafts. So as like a 10th or 12th, 10 to 12th round pick where you can stash him and see if he produces, I think that is likely going to be the scenario for him. Rico Dowdle gets signs with Pittsburgh. I think I think, to be their 1A to Jalen Warren's 1B. I think this is more than anything a burn on Caleb Johnson, who they took in the third round last year. It certainly seems like he has not been able to earn the trust of anybody just yet. So adding running back depth to, I mean, he really is a perfect Pittsburgh Steeler too. Gritty, keeps his head down, just wants to work hard and earn an opportunity. I think he'll fit in great in Pittsburgh, and I think he will be the goal line back there to shore up a backfield. Romeo Doubs signs with the Patriots to I think it's a 4-year extension, but he goes to a team that loses Stephon Diggs and really was relying on some more like role players at each position. I think he immediately steps into a Stephon Diggs plus kind of role. And Stephon Diggs was a top 15 at least receiver this past season. Maybe snuck into the top 12 just in terms of catches and touchdowns and everything else, but goes to a team that needs a reliable receiver. He doesn't win with speed, but he's a savvy route runner. He knows how to stack defenders and go be a ball winner downfield. So I think whereas Stephon Diggs was really working underneath and in the intermediate, Doubs does that, plus has some downfield opportunities in an offense where you have Drake May throwing you the ball, so you're going to have a shot downfield, that's for sure. I like this pickup. He probably slots in as like a low end wide receiver 2, maybe high end wide receiver 3. So that's my expectation for his draft capital. Maybe a little bit sooner than that. So we're probably looking at round 6 or 7. I would start looking at Romeo Doubs, just because I know that Drake May and Josh McDaniels want to spread the ball around. I expect them to add another pass catcher at some point, tight end or otherwise. Apparently, they're a hot place to go for if you need a tight end. So they could be in that Eli Stowers market. Kenyon Sadiq down at 31 in the draft would be interesting. I don't think Sadiq's going to go that low, though. And then a couple other minor pieces here. Geno Smith signs or gets traded to the Jets, I should say. I think it's like a 6th or 7th round swap. So he goes to the Jets, and he, I think, gives you the floor that you are hoping for. Like, I think what I've heard and what I agree with is like you need to have at least competent quarterback play to evaluate the rest of your team. And I think that's what the Jets are in right now. They're trading guys away, they're bringing guys in. They like their core group of weapons in Garrett Wilson, A.D. Mitchell, Breece Hall, Mason Taylor. Like, that is not the worst skill group in the NFL, in my opinion. And all you need is to be able to evaluate those players and your offense as a whole. When you do, and how do you do that? You bring in a veteran like Geno Smith, who, if anything, is reliable. I don't think he is as bad as his season in Las Vegas went last year. I think everybody would agree with that. So to be a transition quarterback on a 1-year deal, or what's left of it, I think what's left of his contract from Las Vegas, like he gets to come in, be a starter, and work with these weapons. Who I think, honestly, if with the offensive line being in the shape that it is, and with these weapons, it should be effective if you have competent quarterback play. If he's incompetent, unfortunately, your project failed, but at least you'll be that much closer to the number 1 overall pick in what should be a better quarterback draft next season. I'll do this one first before we get to our last item. Rachaad White goes to Washington. So another, I don't think a move like this prohibits them from drafting a Jeremiah Love at 7, if that's where they do want to go with that pick and if he is available there. So I think they shore up a backfield where they've lost Chris Rodriguez to the Jaguars. I think Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt was really the only running back they kind of had on staff. So you bring in Rachaad White, who's kind of your steady Eddie. He is not efficient in the run game, but he can do it. And then he's pretty proficient as a receiver. So a nice depth piece to a team that's certainly trying to build itself up in what is becoming a pretty competitive NFC East. So I like that pickup for Washington. we'll see if it ends up um, being the only move they make at running back. And finally, the last piece of news that I have that I think is worthy of being discussed is, of course, Kyler Murray decides to sign with Minnesota after kind of testing a couple other teams' interests. He goes into a situation where I think, okay, so a lot of people out there, when it comes to the podcast that I listen to, all seem to want to say that Kyler Murray isn't as bad as what people seem to be projecting on him, especially from last season where he was effectively benched by the team. I think he's pretty bad. And is he better than JJ McCarthy? Sure. I still think there's going to be a problem connecting on some of these over the middle shots, which is always going to be um, part of his game. Unfortunately, he just can't see the middle of the field all that consistently. I think he bails on plays pretty often, even when something might be there or might be open. And you could say his work ethic is questionable at best. So I think those. I mean, you can say all you want to say about his EPA per play. You can say anything you want to say about he throws a great deep ball and he's a good athlete, and you can say all those things. And I hear you. I think, I guess, if you're Minnesota and you just went 9-8, are you going to feel better about going like what are they going to finish as if let's say Kyler Murray raises the floor and gives you some ceiling to your offense where your defense is already really good and they win 11 or 12 games. Does that mean they're going to sign Kyler Murray to an extension? Does that mean that he's earned the right to stay the starting quarterback? I would be, I would be, hmm, I would be skeptical. I think, and we're going to find out. And I could be proven wrong here, as I usually am. But I don't think the pluses that he brings are to such an extent that I guess does Kevin O'Connell think he can revive Kyler Murray, and is it all going to be worth it in the end? Are they going to win a playoff game? Is that going to be like mission accomplished on that front? And Kyler Murray's going to be revived, and it's these are a lot of like fun things to think about and fun things to consider. But then I think about all the detriments I already mentioned, and it's a coin flip. I think it truly is a coin flip in terms of what this outcome will be. Because if he crashes and burns, which is possible, and JJ McCarthy's your other quarterback, which you seem to think is not good enough, then I don't know where Minnesota goes from there. Like, are you? I don't know. It's going to be a fun offseason conversation. I think the entire offseason when it comes to breaking this down, and if Kyler Murray can get back to sort of those in the MVP conversation sort of performances, it'll be good for Justin Jefferson. It'll be good for the entire offense there. Jordan Addison and maybe even T.J. Hawkinson who ended up getting his deal reworked to stick around. Like we'll see. I think it's going to be one of the more fun conversations to have during the offseason, especially since we didn't really see Kyler play much of last season at all. Like the last things we saw from him were pretty bad, and um, I guess if you're Minnesota, you got to take a dice roll like that. Okay, well, that was a lot of me talking, and I hope you guys enjoyed. Obviously, there was a lot of free agent moves that happened over this past week. A lot of defensive players finding new homes and that are going to be game changers on these teams. Absolutely. A lot of other offensive players that I didn't get to because I didn't think they moved the dial all that much. I think, as always, the NFL moves and changes pretty quickly. And if you blink your eye for a second, you're going to get left behind. So I think staying on top of these kind of moves, it's going to be good for the conversation and the content generator for all of us podcasters. But I think I'm very happy with some of these moves, and I think it's, as always during the offseason, everything's optimism. But I think there's a lot of players that you can feel comfortable with as their stock rising as a result of these moves. So enjoy your weekend, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the episode. We'll be back next week with another divisional breakdown, plus maybe some quick review of this. If I missed anything, or if you guys think that there's some players I should have mentioned, drop them in the comments. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. We appreciate it. We enjoy doing this as a hobby, and we will see you all next week. Thank you very much. Peace.